Winning thought leadership demands multidisciplinary collaboration and execution. That's why I believe it's the quintessential B2B team sport. Sadly, most B2B outfits find team play in the context of thought leadership extremely challenging. That's because they hire iconoclasts to sit in ivory towers and think big thoughts that are often devoid of real-world applicability or practicality. They then incent these big thinkers to go one-on-one in a market where victory demands zone play and picking up your teammates. To thrive amid the creative chaos of identifying, researching, writing, packaging, and disseminating big ideas, B2B organizations need the contributions of many people, some of whom excel at left-brain thinking, others who favor right-brain cogitation. It's rare that you find someone who can master both cerebral hemispheres, and I was fortunate to work closely with one of those Renaissance people. Paul Roehrig is the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer at Ascendion, a digital engineering and talent solution company that helps hundreds of clients accelerate business transformation. I met Paul in 2008 when he was a principal analyst at Forrester Research, and I was running thought leadership at Cognizant Technology Solutions. In late 2010, I ran into Paul at a Cognizant offsite meeting and innocently asked, when did we start inviting analysts to our year-end global planning confab? His response, I am one of you. Almost immediately, I found Paul to be someone who excelled at developing big ideas. And as a former professional musician, academic, and analyst, he was quite adept at jamming on a variety of thought leadership initiatives, from fact-based research reports through short-form transmedia that combines lighter text, videos, and animation. We worked closely together when he led marketing for Cognizant's business process operations, when he founded and managed the Cognizant Center for the Future of Work, and when he took on a strategy-setting role embedded within Cognizant's digital business and technology business unit. Over the years, we also collaborated on a variety of award-winning and best-selling books that Paul co-authored. Monster, A Tough Love Letter on Taming the Machines That Rule Our Lives, Jobs, and Future, published in 2021. What to Do When Machines Do Everything, published in 2017. And Code Halos, How the Digital Lives of People, Things, and Organizations Are Changing the Rules of Business, published in 2014. Over the years, Paul has taken center stage at a wide range of public, academic, and industry events, such as the World Economic Forum, Dreamforce, Oracle Open World, the Churchill Club, the Atlantic Festival, Politico, and many, many more. He's regularly been featured in publications such as Forbes, Business Week, The Economic Times, The Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Fortune India, Clarin, Times of India, Computer World, and others. Clearly, Paul has quite a bit to say about everything thought leadership, so let's get right to it. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much, Alan. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for your far too kind introduction.
So let's kick it off. You started your business career on the hardware side of things at Digital Equipment Corp, Compaq, and HP. How and why did you make the transition to Forrester and the more analytical, interpretive side of the tech business?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I had a fantastic time at those companies helping do big deals. So like you said, I'd been a musician for a while. I had been an academic, and then I joined DEC actually, which then became Compaq and later on HP. And got a chance to do big services deals. So I was, I was actually on the delivery side, and I was working with clients and doing pursuits and doing implementation. And so I really learned a lot about, our industry, with from the front lines. And so I had a background in doing research and writing and things like that. And I mean, the truth is, I had little kids, and I was on the road all the time, and I wanted to find a little bit better of a balance point, and I had done a lot in the services business for a while, and so I started looking around, and this company called Forrester, we just met each other, and interviewing with the team there was fantastic. It's a terrific company, so I was super excited about the chance to be able to write and do research and learn more about the industry overall. And work with some really exciting and engaging people. And all of that turned out to happen.
That's wonderful, yeah. So what did you learn at Forrester that you applied to the thought leadership strategy you embraced at Cognizant that fueled the Center for the Future work, the pioneering stuff you guys were doing, and helped Cognizant differentiate itself as really a leader in the marketplace, differentiated from its competitors, many of whom were saying the same things that Cognizant was saying, but you guys came up with a different way of framing it and expressing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't express enough gratitude to the Forrester team and the company that George Colony built and even the early founders, like guys like Bill Blue and some of some of the original analysts like John McCarthy. I mean, they built a remarkable culture around being bold, coloring outside the lines, and we were really encouraged to find the edge ideas, and then they taught us with methods and people and processes in a in a small company on like how do you actually build a business around serving others with ideas, and that's the main thing that I think that lesson I learned firsthand from those folks that I mentioned, as well as people that are fantastic analysts in the industry still, right? That people that are still working in Forrester, right? People like Liz Herbert and Bill Martorelli and their colleagues, right? And so I learned how important it was to create and craft resonant ideas and stories in a way that delivered value to people who were consuming it and were actually at risk of just being overwhelmed by massive amounts of content. So for something to really matter, it had to have an authenticity, it had to be well researched, it had to be true, and also be well constructed and deliver very practical advice. And those are lessons that I learned, starting in journalism school, but I really, the finishing school was absolutely Forrester. And then we took those ideas into Cognizant and the Center for the Future of Work with the idea of service to the consumer, right? That was the whole point, is to like give people great ideas that they can act on, deliver to them in a way that's compelling and provocative and maybe even a little bit fun. And that actually worked.
You raise an interesting point. The craft of storytelling, really focusing in on edge ideas, giving people something really thought-provoking to wrap their heads around, all very important in terms of how to build Cognizant's eminence and reputation in the marketplace as being a partner of choice. But how do you then square that with the need for the sales and the biz dev people to focus on what they can sell today? You guys are out a little bit over the curve, a little bit looking beyond the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 5, 7, 10 years out. How do you help the salespeople to position Cognizant with your thought leadership to be effective in continuing the momentum that the company had in those years?
Yeah, well, it's a great question as well. And that was, because we worked there together, that was a constant question that we were always trying to do our best to ensure that we were answering that. And to me, and I think to all of us, I don't want to speak for you, but to all of us, it felt like, as long as the true north was, how do we help the person that we're trying to serve make a good decision, right? Based on something that's true and authentic and accessible and meaningful and with emotional resonance, because they're trying to solve big problems, right? And if you talk about too far out in the future and you're talking about, flying cars and things like that, we really didn't go there. We talked about, there might have been a long-term strategy question that somebody was trying to answer, but we always tried to find that sweet spot, if you will, that so that it was practical and applicable to them, right? So I think the takeaway that, one of the things that I learned from doing this, with you is that if you keep that as your true north, right, that the ideas have to be of service to someone who's trying to consume it, right? Then the other problem actually kind of solves itself, because those are the questions that the clients and the potential clients are asking. So if you can help answer that, then the sales team is going to be thrilled, because now you're going to be invited to have a dialogue. If you go too far out, we're going to mine, Mars or something like that. That's like most people, that's not on their, their strategic event horizon, right? But as long as you keep it relevant, right, the salespeople are going to love it, because you're being of service to the clients. And that's what all good salespeople want to do. They want to be of service and they want to be part of the dialogue. And if you can find that spot and really spend a lot of thought on making sure that you don't get too far out ahead, or too far behind, then you're serving the client, but you're also going to, drive some economic value for the company that you're working with.
Yeah. That's interesting because a thought leadership culture that embodies these things that you're talking about is so critical to really having a voice and a really credible voice in the marketplace. And I just put together with some of my colleagues a paper that looks at thought leadership culture and
Hmm.
how really it has to be influenced from an outside in perspective. The values, beliefs, and behaviors that you embrace as an organization have to be defined and evolved in terms of how your customer perceives you. And without that, a true north will never come to pass.
You got it. I mean, that's exactly right. Otherwise, it's just sort of, it's self-serving, and it might feel satisfying. Hey, I wrote this white paper, but it doesn't really, if it's not of service to somebody that you're trying to help, it's not going to go anywhere. And there's, you and I know that there's boatloads of that content, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and people put a lot of care into it, and it's not bad by any means. But if it's not written with that philosophy of I'm trying to serve someone, I'm trying to help them solve a problem, or even ask a good question, then you get in these stories where maybe thought leadership, it's like, well, we did this white paper and nobody downloaded it, so thought leadership is useless. And that's like, well, maybe that was, but it's not useless if you do it right.
Absolutely. So, talking about doing it right and looking at it in terms of how you serve your customer best, you guys had a very rigorous ideation process, and a lot of it started with good primary research. How critical is good primary research to creating a solid thought leadership foundation?
Oh yeah, it's essential. I mean, it's the and again, this is something that we worked on all the time, right? If you start with what's the problem someone's trying to solve, and then what's the gap, what's the knowledge gap, and then that drives the primary research. I think where sometimes companies get into trouble is like, well, we need a white paper. Okay, but why, right? And it if you start with here's how we're going to be of service to clients, doesn't matter what business you're in. Like we work in the technology industry, but it doesn't really matter, right? You could be in any kind of industry. You could be in healthcare, you can be in retail, and there's always big questions about ideas. What's coming next? How do we interpret it? What are we missing? Right? Every good leader is thinking about that constantly. So good thought leadership on the provider side, on the helper side, if you will, right? If you create those assets that answer those questions, or begin to answer those questions, or unlock something unknown, or inspire somebody, all of that falls into, this is a good thought leadership piece. We call it thought leadership because it drives things forward, and that's the entire key. If you can continue to do that and focus on doing that, then good things will happen, both on the side of being helped, and also the side that's doing the help.
And I know, you're having worked closely with you, that research design is very important. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers, and you're not going to be able to make sense of whatever answers you get. So can you talk a little bit about your whole thought process in terms of designing quality research that has integrity?
Yeah, I mean, and again, we ground on this, and it's and I learned this in grad school. It's really, really hard to ask a good question. It's a lot harder to ask a good question. But if you do that well, I'm not saying we did it right all the time, but if you do that better, then you get a better primary research study design. Versus, hey, we need to do a white paper and we're really interested in, I don't know, quantum computing, so we're going to design a white paper for quantum computing. Well, maybe that's true, but then you've got to make sure that you're serving the people that you're trying to serve. But that research design, getting together and really starting with how do we respond to that, and then what is the right question to answer, the right set of questions, And right, we went back and forth, and questions would come in and they would go out, and then we would pivot. And it was all before we even, asked a single question. It was like, what is a thing that we're trying to understand? And we would tag each question on what are we really trying to get to? And we would work on the wording and then you get down into actual instrument design. But if you don't start with what's the right question to ask, what are we really trying to understand, then the methods part becomes really impossible, because then you're all over the place and you collect data that you don't need. And then you end up and you're trying to do an analysis and you're like, we didn't really answer the question we were trying to answer.
That means to the end is so important. If you just focus on the end, you're lost for sure. And most importantly, as you said, that hypothesis, really honing down on what it is you really want to learn and understand, and what you need to prove or disprove to make the piece work. And more importantly, I remember many conversations with you. So what is that big headline? What does the headline say?
That's a pretty good method, tactically. Is like, we had a headline for each question when we put these things together, and we didn't always use them, because actually once you look at the data, sometimes there wasn't a headline, but there could have been a headline. And then we did get more bold and provocative headlines, and they had resonance with people we were trying to serve. So if it was about a technology or an economic impact or things like that, those are high value questions that people have, regardless of what industry you're in. And so if you have something new to say, something fresh to say that's clear and bold and true and authentic, and then there's a story that's told well with words and data sets and graphics, and it's interpreted in a way that adds value, that's what we were always shooting for. I don't know if we always hit it, but we're certainly shooting in that direction.
I think we did better than most organizations, but we'll let others judge that.
Yeah.
So you talked about methods, and the one interesting element of your process was the data party. When you sat everybody down, you looked at all the data, you tried to make sense of it. These were very, very long-winded, arduous types of meetings in which we just go through the data round and round and round. And can you talk a little bit about how important that is and what your thought process was behind that?
Yeah, I don't know how they were hard, but I thought they were fun. I mean, it wasn't
You're a
always
glutton for punishment, I think.
Oh, it was. I mean, if you really are committed, spend a lot of time and money trying to get to what's the right question. You've looked at how are you going to be of service, and then you design a study, and then you collect all this data. So that's it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's complicated, it's invasive, right? You're pushing things out there in the world and asking people to answer your questions and stuff. And then you get this data, which, we treat it as like a gift, which it is a gift, right? It's very hard to get, it's rare. And if you do it right, it's really super valuable. But then what is inside the data, right? And we would have these data parties where we would have everybody that was involved in the study just going through what does this say? What is it really, and what does it mean? Because it's easy enough to print out, graphs, right? But what does the graph mean? And how do you interpret it? Because if you're just reporting data, you're not really adding the last, super important layer of creating insight from the data. And so the data parties were, what does this say? Were we right? Did we have a good hypothesis? Not were we right, but do we have a good hypothesis, right? And do we have something new and bold and provocative to say that's going to be meaningful to the people we're trying to serve? And what is that story? And so then as you know, right, where we started, sometimes it was where we ended up, but a lot of times the data party, we would come up with new insights. And we did it collaboratively, right? Because you might look at it and go, well, I see this, and somebody else might look at it and go, well, I see that. And then it would be arduous because you have to find out what is the truth. So it's almost like unlocking the truth within a data set, the essential truth that means something to the people you're trying to serve. Otherwise, you're just hitting, print on huge reams of data without the interpretation, without the nuance, without the storytelling element around it, because data is only data, right? Until it's interpreted and converted into a story that has an emotional resonance and that answers something important to somebody trying to make a decision in their lives. And if you
You were
can
very,
do that, then that's a good thing.
you were very big on distilling signal from noise. And you should always talk about how people shouldn't just be reciting the findings, that you need that interpretive layer, that you need to explain what it means. Don't tell us that, 9 out of 10 people said this. Tell us, what does that mean? And that's much
Exactly.
more important.
It is important. Maybe that's, 9 out of 10 people agree that a clear sky on Earth is blue. So you've proven something, that's not going to help somebody make a decision. And what does that mean to somebody who's trying to do something? That's a frivolous example, but if you've got economic data around, where's the market heading around a kind of technology, right? That's super important to somebody that's, in retail or in, whatever industry they're in. And so they're trying to make sense of the world. And if we're just, regurgitating data without interpreting and providing a story, I don't think thought leadership or what we call thought leadership is really doing as much as it can to be of service.
And given all that you just gone through, you also were very big on the fact that you needed to tell stories in colorful ways and narrative structures that really help to bring the storyline out and back it with good facts and figures and examples and evidence and whatnot. And that's not easy to do. Most B2B organizations write fairly boring, dry, bland types of white papers. And you and the Center for the Future of Work and the work that we did together, we always strove to do something different, better, and outside of the box a little bit. So can you talk about your process there and how you really come up with those really captivating storylines?
Well, I mean, one of my, and you know this, right? But one of my favorite, business books of all time was Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, who founded and ran Pixar and Disney Animation. And, his whole idea was, how do you tell a good story? And he wanted to do it with computers. I mean, that's how that's how Pixar started. This guy was a decent animator and a decent computer scientist, and he wanted to put both together and do something extraordinary. And then he did. And then he created businesses around it. And so the whole story around how do you monetize creativity? How do you achieve an emotional resonance, in his case or Pixar's case, with a broad audience. And for ours, I think the same themes hold true, right? It's certainly a smaller audience trying to solve more specific and finite questions. But the lessons about how do you tell a good story are absolutely, relevant. And there are companies that are doing it, really well, right? Some of the stuff that McKinsey, I think the center, did it really well. I think McKinsey does it really well. Accenture, clearly, they're thinking about the world this way. But if you put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to serve, the idea is, how would they consume information? And we're all inundated with, it's back to signal and noise. We're all inundated. Signal becomes noise if there's too much of it, right? And so part of thought leadership is sorting through the noise and creating that crystalline story that is true, authentic, supported by the best available data, which may not be perfect, but it's the best available data, and interpreted in a way so that somebody receiving that signal says, okay, this is important. I like it, right? Because we're humans and we like stories and we want to see stories that resonate with us, and it can be useful. I think that's kind of where we were trying to, and we did this together. This is what we were trying to do, to be of service.
So what role does data visualization techniques, video animation play in winning thought leadership, so that it's not just viewed as eye candy, it's really part and parcel of telling the story?
Yeah, that's a super important question, Alan. And it does come back to putting the story first. So like some companies will say, well, I want a white paper. And then somebody will say, well, we need to have an animated version of the data. And it's like, well, do you? If it has emotional resonance and authenticity and truth and is helpful to people that are consuming it and helps create a clearer signal rather than noise, you should definitely do it. It's worth every penny. But if not, which is often the case, without having that clear story, it just becomes, like you said, it's maybe eye candy. It's really kind of gets in the way of the story. Like, I think, it's like a great song. Some of the Disney Pixar stories are so beautifully constructed. Even though they're beautifully produced, you could actually tell the story with stick figures, right? Just like a beautiful song. I mean, they're hard to break. And that's what from a thought leadership perspective, you get the assets to be that good, where it's that clear and that true and that authentic and that emotionally resonant, the how you tell the story just expands it even more. But if you start with, we want a white paper, and then we also want a website, and then we want an animated thing, and we want, then you're not, if you're starting there, and versus what are the questions that we're trying to answer, who are we trying to serve, how do we really get the right story put together that's bold and provocative and interesting and helpful, right? Then you're, if you take that one path, then you're avoiding spending a lot of time and a lot of money for not a lot of benefit for anybody, really. But if the story is great, then you can apply these other storytelling mechanisms in a really valuable way.
Exactly. I think you have to be true to the fundamentals of storytelling and not just throw things out there just for the sake of showing that you can do it. It has to fit the whole concept and the construct of what you're trying to share. And you're right. That North Star needs to be the recipient of the information and how they're going to process what you're sharing with them. So I couldn't agree more. Why don't we pivot now to more traditional media? Books. You were involved in 3 award-winning best-selling books, and you guys came up with some really thought-provoking ideas. Can you talk about that process and how something became a book rather than a report or a blog or some long-form piece of content?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and you were there at the beginning too, so that we started out with what's the story we wanted to tell. And when the story itself took shape, that was outside of a white paper and outside of a video and outside, it was like, again, it was back to the fundamentals, Alan. Like you said, it was about what's the story you want to tell. And when we were starting to tell the story about Code Halos, when it got long enough, it was like, well, this isn't really a white paper, and it's actually something else. And it was, maybe the level of complexity went up, so that, hey, we needed a little more space to be able to let some of the ideas breathe. It's a lot more data, a lot more anecdotes, a lot more applied experience. How are we thinking about this? There were some new terms and new models, and they need a little bit of time, right? And so the first book that we put together actually kind of grew out of, all the stuff that we were talking about. How are we trying to be of service to the people that we want to help? And then what is the true, authentic story that we wanted to tell? And then the rest of it was, how do we actually do that? And that was a big learning journey for all of us, which is, because they get harder. When you get, I've never made a movie, but I imagine it's harder than a short film, right? So, so the book was the same thing. And so all the fundamental things that we were talking about before, about how do you ask a good question? How do you establish, utility to somebody who's consuming whatever asset you're creating? And then the asset just shaped, like the book actually came around the story and the data and the insights that we wanted to talk about more than anything else.
No, I remember that quite well. The issue is at many organizations, though, you and your co-authors held very important positions at the organization. Writing a book, not a part-time endeavor. You got to be all in, or you're not going to get out of it what you really need to. How did you sell it up the food chain and tell people, hey, this is really important? Give us some space. We'll still do our day jobs, but you have to cut us a little slack so that we can do this and do it well.
Well, I mean, and those leaders as well as I do. I mean, it wasn't really a sales job that we had to do. It was, here's the story we want to tell, and clients were looking for it, right? And so the leaders that we were working with at the time, they knew from firsthand experience the kind of problems that clients were trying to solve, and they knew what was going to establish resonance. So they knew that this mattered to the people that we wanted to help. And so for them to say, I don't want to say it was easy, because we did have to make a business justification, and we did, and it worked out, thankfully. But we went in logically with the idea of being of service to others. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the investment it's going to take on our side, and here's what we think is going to happen. And fortunately, those all those wires kind of lined up. But I wouldn't say we had to sell it up the line in the sense that there was a huge amount of resistance. The leaders of the company were open-minded and incredibly supportive, and very kind of progressive. Like they were like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. Let's just try it. So we managed the downside risk. We did a very heavy lift on our own, as you kind of hinted at. And it was super fun, right? It was fun to do because it opened doors for the company, because we were being helpful with a story that had utility and emotional resonance for the people we were trying to serve.
So after we finished Code Halos, I remember distinctly, I don't know if it was you or one of your other co-authors who said to me, I am never doing this again. This is too hard. I don't know if I could live through another book. And then I don't know if it was 9 or 12 months later, I heard kind of that you guys were working on something, and there you were in the middle of it once again. What changed your mind?
The people were trying to help. I mean, it became like from a Code Halo perspective, was about creating business models around data. And that came out in 2014. And then, when we were going around talking about Code Halos, the new ideas kept popping up. And when they were popping up over and over again, it was like, hey, what about this, applied artificial intelligence, and taking the data that we were talking about and really, what are the machines that are changing everything, how business is done, how we're living our lives. And so that machines came as a natural extension. It really was a chapter 2 to Code Halos in a sense, because it was really about the machines doing more and more and shaping how work was being done and how value was being created and how we were living our lives, and educating our children and banking and healing ourselves and insuring ourselves. And so that was what machines was about. And as we were going around and speaking to different companies, and the questions that were coming up, and the provocations and the interest around these different things, that's what was like, hey, wait, there's another story here, and maybe we should tell it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I guess, you're a former journalist, recovering academic, and somebody who consumes a lot of content. I know you're very well read, but sadly, I don't think a lot of people are these days. Is long form thought leadership dead in a world that seems to thrive on shorter form blogs and videos and bursty and often erroneous tweets and other misinformation that percolates across social media?
Well, I think irrelevant stories and low utility data is probably kind of jumped the shark, if you will. It doesn't, people don't want that, and there's so much content available right now. It gets back to what you were saying before, right? It's the signal, and if the signal is clear, regardless of the form factor, right? People definitely, all of us are, right? Life in 2022 is not the same, as it was in 1962, right? And so I think, I don't know, but I'm assuming that's true. What we need as participants as business leaders is we still need new ideas. We still need provocation. We still need to learn more about what's going on, and all of those are gaps that good thought leadership can close. And hey, look, if it's going to take you, a few more hours to read through a book, but it's really important and really good and really interesting, that's still going to be valuable and have resonance. It's if it's boring and derivative and not, doesn't really add much and feels like it's a marketing piece, that's not going to be relevant. And that's even less relevant now that there's more content available. Just like a tweet can be a provocative thing, right? A provocative thing, hey, here's a good question, or here's a link to something that's really cool. And so I do think that people, are less patient around content just because there's so much more of it. But I still think, and I will, and I hope it's true, that, good content, good stories, authentic stories, something that is of service, that's as relevant, today as it is tomorrow, as it was yesterday.
Good answer. So if we are heading towards a softer economy, whether you're a resource deprived company or a company that has some cash to spend on this, how do you suggest companies go forward and figure out how to ideate and actually build a thought leadership program that's going to offer returns on ideas and on the investment of making those ideas publicly available?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's on everybody's mind right now, right? Because, there's anybody with a keyboard and an opinion, which is pretty much all of us, can say something about the economy, and it's going to be a recession. It's not going to be a recession. It's going to be depression. It's going to be nothing. We're just kind of right now. Who knows, right? So, in situations like that, I think the best thing we can do is kind of just step back and say, what do we know? What do we believe to be true? So, for example, right, do we believe the future of our economy is going to be less dependent on technology? Probably not. Do we think there's going to be, or do we believe it to be true that software, for example, is going to be more and more essential to how business value is created and how we conduct various aspects of our lives? It's really hard to imagine life without Facebook, Google, Amazon, Netflix, right? All of these software platforms that surround us in our data, or Zoom, like we're on right now, right? These are part of our lives, and it's really hard to imagine what the world would be like without them. And I think, more and more business leaders are concluding that software is more essential to every value proposition. So it may not be a truth, but I think it's a pretty strong likelihood. And so if that's true, and I'm just using this as an example, from a thought leadership perspective, any ideas, we worked with Malcolm Frank, who's probably one of the best thought leaders in the entire technology industry. And he said, the digital economy is going to go to those who have the best ideas, right? And thought leadership is not just an engine for marketing, it's an engine for ideas that serve clients, but it also serves the company within which it operates. McKinsey and Accenture have great ideas. Some of them come from consultants, some of them come from people who do, thinking about it work, right? Some of it comes from clients, it's pulled in from consultants, right? Those ideas are what shape the portfolio of tomorrow. And so what's the value of that? To me, thought leadership, because it's an engine for ideas, if it's done right, you're serving clients, right? And you are getting brand eminence, and you're building a market position because of your good ideas. But that's only half the story. The other half is it changes your company. It changes the company within which it operates, because now you have an engine. You have people that are tasked with and hopefully good at, thinking about what's coming next. So thought leadership presumed to be just an external thing, like we'll throw this stuff out there and hopefully somebody will like us more, versus, no, we have a good set of ideas. They're provocative. They may not all be right, but at least they're interesting, and they're going to help get you to a better answer. That helps clients. And it also helps you, because if you're good at this, you're learning from the thought leadership engine as well, right? And we saw that happen also, right? It changed. So to me, the thought leadership engine is just, well, it's marketing, and we have a few extra dollars, so let's do a white paper, right? That happens all the time, and I just don't think that's sometimes it can work out, but you look at the companies that do it well, and that's not at all what they're doing.
Not at all. There's got to be method to the madness. So speaking about the future of the economy and the importance of software code to that economy, without showing your hand too much, can you give us a sense of what your thought leadership plans are at Ascendion?
Yeah, I mean, we think, well, certainly the software economy is just, we're still in the early innings of the shift to the kind of the overall digital economy, which is really, I think, the software is the mechanism through which we engage all the other technologies, right? Whether it's your television or your watch or your laptop or your, dishwasher, software is the mechanism that we use to engage analytics and artificial intelligence and big data. We don't think that's going to change. What has changed, and the change seems to be accelerated, is the notion of software engineering as the nexus point for all kind of future value, not all, but a larger percentage of future value creation. That seems to be a truth. And the people that do that, that build that software, build those systems, is even more important than ever before. And we've seen this play out in the pandemic. I think the pandemic has poured, rocket fuel on a trend that already had started, where the notion of software engineering plus a talent orchestration, talent transformation model, putting those two pieces together to deliver to what clients need now in a modern economy versus more of an industrial economy. I think in some senses, the pandemic could well be the end of the last industrial revolution. And so what we're doing with Ascendion is strengthening that engine, continuing to build out those capabilities. And the ideas that we're putting out and will put out will be around that. What is a company in a post-pandemic, post-digital, if you will, world, right? What is the role of talent? Like we've talked a lot about we had the Center for the Future of Work. And now what is the future of work now, right? Because the pandemic has really shifted a lot of assumptions and proven them, some to be right and some to be wrong. And now every enterprise decision maker is going, okay, well, so now what? And so I think how work changes, the role of software, the role of talent, right? How we work, right? Are we really going to continue to organize in a kind of a pseudo-industrial model where hundreds of thousands of people have to move into a cubicle every morning? I don't think we're going to go back to that. But that's a huge opportunity for companies to lean into that true future of work. So that's what our thought leadership agenda is going to explore.
Well, I look forward to you guys taking those topics on and you shining a beacon of light on it to hopefully help us all get there at some point. Anything else you want to comment on? This has been a very thought-provoking and interesting conversation. Anything we didn't cover that you think is critical here?
Yeah, we talked a lot about economics and the role of thought leadership. The one thing that we didn't talk about, but we started to a little bit, is kind of the culture of curiosity. And I think companies that do this well or that aspire to do this well, I think nurturing a culture of curiosity and recognizing that curiosity and that inquiry is of service to others as well as to your firm. And that if you do that, it's not only a business value, it's fun, because now there's a joy in this that I think often gets overlooked. I mean, we kind of joked around the data party, but it's fun to joke about because we liked it, right? We liked wrestling with what are these ideas, and it helped the companies we were trying to serve, and it helped our company, right? And I think that's an important point, particularly now, right? So regardless of how the next economic phase plays out, no company that you or I know about is sitting around with a bag of gold in the corner that just says thought leadership on it, right? And so these are critical investments, and it's a real strategic decision for every board and every C-suite. But to recognize as well that nurturing curiosity in your company, if you were to play it out the opposite and say, no, we don't want that, I don't think anybody would say that. And this is a way to do that. This is a way, by building out thought leadership engines, by valuing it. I don't think you need to spend, as much as some other companies, but it is important and valuable, and it is a high ROI investment to have that in your company as something that matters, because ideas matter, particularly in the post-pandemic digital economy. And companies that lean into that are going to thrive, with a higher likelihood of thriving. Companies that pull away from that and say, no, we're not in, I think that's a pretty risky bet, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can't get smarter, you can't get better as a person or as an organization without having a curious mind. We would embrace that entirely. In fact, the report that I've just put together with my colleagues on culture talks a little bit about that. So we are in sync on that one. Hey, Paul, I really want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. Thanks for joining us on Everything Thought Leadership.
Thanks, Alan. Great to chat. hope everybody love to hear what everybody thinks.
As Paul noted, being bold, coloring outside the lines, and serving others with great thoughts is critical to winning in the crowded marketplace of ideas. The winning thought leadership formula is all about creating ideas and stories that have relevance and veracity, built from rigorous data, analysis, and interpretation, and that resonate with those who you are trying to help solve big, hairy business challenges. They are your true north. But thought leaders can't get too far out ahead of the market's needs. Regardless of the topic, that means no flying cars or mining of Mars, as Paul notes. It's all about offering up practical, applicable ideas that fit into a long-term strategy today and or tomorrow. This will not only ensure that your organization engages targets, but gets your sales team involved to start or continue conversations. That happens when the dialogue is real, relevant, and in service to the client. And that's why it's essential to do your homework, and that starts with a rigorous research foundation. What's the problem? Where's the knowledge gap in the market's mind? Where's the best solution? How can the client get there from here, as Paul postulates? It's hard to ask good questions, but if you grind it out, you will achieve better study design. Once you figure out what you're trying to understand, you can develop the right methods of acquiring data, including building an effective survey instrument. In a world suffering from attention deficit syndrome and drawn to short-form, bursty content, Paul believes there's still room for long-form content like books, as long as they cover relevant topics and have incredible utility. That only happens when they offer new thinking on ways to solve seemingly intractable problems. As Paul says, humans like stories, drawn from the best available data, told colorfully with interesting twists and turns, and books, when done right, will always fit that bill. Books give ideas space to breathe. New models need time and space to evolve and to be turned into compelling prose. And the discussions spurred by books spawn new ideas, and if properly compiled and leveraged, can inform new products and services. These are the lessons Paul learned over the years as a thought leader and strategist. He plans to put many of them into play in his new gig at Ascendion. Like you, I look forward to hearing from him and his firm on the evolution of the software economy and the future of talent, as well as the end of the industrial economy. As Paul said, great thought leadership requires a culture of curiosity. That's something we can all ascribe to. Thanks again for joining us at Everything Thought Leadership.